It's a victory! I got the title of Beauty Queen. I'm so happy to be standing here in front of the audience. But what's wrong with my hands? They're huge and hairy. Why is the dress bursting at the seams? I rushed to the mirror in the dressing room. I have an Adam's apple and my face is all covered with stubble. There was a giant man in the reflection. That moment, I woke up and immediately ran to the mirror. Is it just me? Or am I really getting bigger? Stop it, Grace. It was just a nightmare. I was waiting for the results of the casting for a beauty contest and became very suspicious. What's that? I looked closer and saw a black hair on my chin. What an abomination! Then my mother knocked on the door. I grabbed the tweezers and yanked the thing out. I didn't want anyone to see it. After breakfast, I rushed to the cosmetologist. Eddie gave me a facial as usual. He also said that my body has become very athletic. I decided to show off. I don't even exercise abs. It's just proper nutrition. Then I went to the cafe, where my boyfriend and girlfriends were waiting for me. On the way, I received a message. Results of the selection for the contest. I was about to open it when my phone went dead. I ran into the cafe and immediately began to look for an outlet to charge the phone. Everyone was eager to know if I was a contestant. Finally, it turned on and... yes, I entered. My boyfriend Mick said he was always proud to be dating the first beauty in school. Of course, a lot of boys were hitting on me. But Lisa and Anne were sitting with long faces. Anne said that they were afraid of failing the upcoming test, and they were not in the mood for fun right now. Hey, I'm having a holiday here. What test? Lisa chimed in. She and Anne were so worried that they were even starting taking sedative pills and offered to try them. Okay, give me. I was also nervous before the contest and decided that it would not be superfluous. The next morning, I woke up with a swollen face. It's strange. There's no such effect after facial. I opened my eyes and went to the mirror, and suddenly... what's wrong with me? The hairs on my chin, and not just one. There were already about 50 of them. It looks like stubble, just like Mick's. I grabbed the tweezers and began to pull out the hairs, but they were so hard. I couldn't do it. Did someone curse me? I hurried to my cosmetologist. He must have made up something and made me a mask with hormones. I was furious, stormed into his office and made a scene. Eddie had a client at the time. But I didn't care. He was surprised and began to assure me that he did not do anything wrong to me. The client did not like the showdown. She was indignant and immediately left. Eddie tried to stop her, but she didn't even turn around. I've never seen him so angry. He kicked me out and shouted at me not to come back. I felt ashamed. Maybe I shouldn't have turned against him. I went to see him all these years, but what's wrong with me? Stop. Maybe it's because of the pills Lisa and Anne gave me. I had long suspected that my friends were jealous of me and my beauty. After Eddie, I cooled down, let the girls admit everything. I went to the cafe where we agreed to meet. Silently sat down in opposite and took off my hood. My friends looked at me with their mouths open. I said the stubble was because of their damn sedatives and asked not to look at me like that. The girls immediately started making excuses, but I didn't believe them. But what's wrong with my voice? It abruptly became low and rough. Maybe my voice broke. I cleared my throat, but my voice was still deep like a man's. I was so ashamed that I just ran away. My mother met me at home and asked me what had happened. I was afraid that she would see my face and I quickly slipped into the room. Mommy, I don't know what's wrong with me. I stole my dad's razor from the bathroom and shaved off my stubble. The skin became smooth and it calmed me down a little. I went to bed hoping that everything would go away in the morning. Mick woke me up in the morning. He was banging insistently on the door. I jumped, and suddenly I felt that after shaving, the stubble was twice as much. Hair grew all over my body. I was itching, and the pajamas seemed to have become too small. I froze in my tracks. What if Mick leaves me because of the way I look now? I told Mick to leave. My voice was still rough, even though I was trying to make it higher. But Mick demanded to be let in immediately. When I opened the door, I saw the disgust on his face. Mick said he needed to get home right away. After that, he sent a text message that we were breaking up. I didn't want to leave the house at all, but I had to test that day. Pulling myself together, I began to get ready for school. I didn't want to ruin my grade for the year because of all this. To hide everything, I put on a hoodie and the whitest jeans, skipped by my favorite dresses. I slipped into the classroom and sat far away so that no one would recognize me. But suddenly, someone pulled off my hood. Mick! He said I was a liar. That I hid my ugliness from him and only pretended to be beautiful. I tried to explain that it was temporary. But then my classmates began to laugh at us. They teased me as a bearded woman, which only the circus wear. I could not collect thoughts on the test. Everyone was cheering, and everyone even threw a pencil at me, and I jumped from my seat in surprise. The teacher sternly asked me to sit down and take off my hood in class. I don't want my classmates to laugh at me again. But a couple of days ago, everyone adored me. I couldn't take it anymore. So I took my things and ran out of the classroom. I came home in tears. I didn't even try to hide from my mother. It didn't make any sense now. My mother was surprisingly calm and said it was just hormonal failure. This was normal at my age. I was not lost yet. My mom told me I needed to take a hormone test, so we went to the doctor. I was looking forward to the results of the examination. Let them give me a magic 4 and this whole nightmare will be over. A doctor came out and told us that I was turning into a boy. How could this be? Are you all crazy here? The doctor explained that I was intersex, a person who may have both female and male secondary sexual characteristics. Unfortunately, this had only just come to light, and now I would develop as a boy. I burst into tears. Mom tried to calm me down, but I thought it was over. My ears were buzzing like after an explosion. We returned home, and I locked myself in my room. It's no easy to accept such news. Then I got a message. I completely forgot that today was the first stage of the beauty contest. I really wanted to get there. I began to think about how the jury and the audience would react. After all, the stubble was so noticeable. I wanted to shave and put some foundation on my stubble. But then I realized I didn't want to do it for the rest of my life. Didn't want to pretend I was the same as before. Didn't want to be ashamed. I was very worried, but I exhaled and went out to my parents. My mom asked me if I really wanted to go. I replied I was really going to perform. It was clear that I had no chance of winning, but I needed it. I ran into the dressing room when the competition had already started. There was a swimsuit show. I barely got it on. And suddenly realized, yes, my body had changed. But I was still the same. I didn't lose my true beauty. Then the host called my name, and I came on stage with a sincere smile. At first, I was applauded, but then the whole hall began to hum indignantly. The audience shouted that there was a man on the stage. The host stopped the show. He asked me what I was doing here. Here it is. The moment of truth. I froze for a second and got scared. But then I saw my parents in the crowd, and Lisa and Anne, they smiled at me, unlike everyone else. I tried not to think about the audience and the jury. I needed those words. And I started talking. I used to strive to be the most beautiful. And now I am the most beautiful. Just like all of us. I hope that one day people will become truly free and stop chasing dubious ideals. So I did a couple of days ago. Yes, my body has changed, but inside I'm still the same. First of all, I'm a person with my own dreams and goals. And I'm standing on the stage right now to prove it to myself and to you. We all want to be beautiful, but we don't have to follow the standard ideal. The main thing is to learn to love yourself. I'm not shy anymore. Someone in the hall started applauding me, then someone else, and now almost everyone was clapping for me. Did they really understand what I was talking about and accepted me? The jury began to confer about something, and they wanted to tell me something. But I just walked away, not waiting to hear. To be honest, now I didn't care what they said. I already won. I proved to myself how strong and beautiful I could be. With stubble and unshaven men's legs. Who I really wanted to see now were my parents and friends. With such close ones, I definitely had nothing to fear. I didn't need to prove anything.
Hi, my name is Maria, and I'm 13. Have your parents ever been ashamed of you? So much that they don't even let their friends see you, or other people's friends, or anyone at all? I know some guys who would be happy about this, but gosh, this is actually disgusting. Watch the video till the end, and you will find out why my parents hid me from everyone. At first, everything was okay. I am the daughter of a writer and a cool businesswoman, and they were even proud of me. Of course, an excellent student goes to a music school and sings. What could go wrong? I was so happy. Besides, not far off was a vocal competition for adults in which I took part. One day, something went wrong during a rehearsal. In the middle of the song, my voice turned into a weird screeching bark. While I was trying to figure out what came over me, the other children laughed, thinking it was a joke. But I wasn't joking. The next time I barked, I was answering at the blackboard during maths. This time, the whole class laughed, and I was kicked out of class for disorderly conduct. I couldn't explain what was wrong, and so I got a punishment, and my classmates gave me a nickname, Dog Girl. Nobody wanted to believe that I wasn't joking, that I was scared myself. The barking happened by itself at the moments when I least wanted it. Can you imagine what it would be like to become a social outcast for something that you cannot control? It only got worse. I barked during singing again. The class was interrupted. Everyone was lying on the floor laughing. Mrs. Casina got angry and suspended me from classes, I quote, until I start behaving decently. It was a total fail. I came home and burst into tears right on the doorstep. I told my mom and dad everything. They said that everything was simple. I just needed to stop barking at people and apologize to the teacher. Well, at least I could apologize. I actually went to Mrs. Casina the next day to apologize. I didn't know on that day people from television came to our school. It turned out that they were recording a lesson with students from elementary school. I wanted to leave quietly, but Mrs. Casina noticed me. She herself asked me to come and began to praise me in front of the camera, even though we had a fight quite recently. I was deeply touched, and when they asked me what I thought about the music school, I warmly praised it, and Mrs. Casina and the choir, and said that it was the best school in the whole city. And then I started barking again. I don't know how it happened. I talk, and suddenly I barked just like a dog. Everyone froze in amazement, and I couldn't even stop. I barked, and then the kids started barking like me. They thought it was a joke. The shooting was hastily stopped. Mrs. Casina stared at me. I realized that it was a complete fiasco. She would never forgive me for this. And my parents didn't forgive me either. When I got home, Mom silently got up from the table and left. Dad asked what the hell I was doing. It turned out that they were watching the live program that was recorded at school and saw me barking. My teacher, all the students from the music school, my parents, a bunch of my friends, everyone saw me barking loudly in front of the camera. And everyone thought that I was fooling around on purpose. Do you know what my reaction to this was? I barked. At that moment, I was barking every day. And I didn't only bark, but also twitched as if I were a puppet. When that happened, my mother got up and left the table. My father was angry, asking what I was trying to achieve. But I didn't want anything. Couldn't they see that I felt bad? I needed a doctor. Mom thought that I needed discipline, not a doctor. But Dad eventually took me to the clinic. There, I was referred to a psychologist, diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome. This is a disease where you get twitches and all sorts of uncontrollable sounds come out, swearing, moaning, or barking. Since it was a disease, it wasn't my fault. No, even better, so it could be cured? As it turned out, no. I shouldn't have hoped for a miracle pill. I was prescribed with light sedatives and told to wait, like the symptoms would subside on their own when I grow up. If I grow up. Because I was going to die right at that moment if I couldn't get into the competition. I fell into real hysterics for several days, mourning my musical career, and completely forgot that my parents and I were invited to a wedding. On day X, I heard them whispering, deciding whether to take me with them or not. And I wanted to cry from longing. I had to prove that I was normal. As soon as I arrived, I immediately took the bull by the horns. I was charming. Everyone was smiling at me more than at the bride. and I saw how my parents casted proud glances at me. That was a success. Has your self-confidence ever let you down? A complete collapse awaited me. The guests asked me to sing for the newlyweds. I felt my muscles begin to twitch, but I stubbornly agreed, hoping just to overcome it. I went to the microphone, looked into the warm, attentive eyes of the happy newlyweds, and I began to bark. At first, the guests thought it was a joke and laughed, but I just froze with horror. I kept barking and couldn't stop. Dad grabbed me by the collar, and my mother turned everything into a joke. You understand, these children. Dad put me in the car, and I spent the whole evening alone, crying in terrible loneliness. We were silent all the way home. I timidly asked if my dad would come to my performance at the competition. What competition? Would you behave like that? My mother answered angrily, and I suddenly went mad. I had been preparing for this performance for a year, and nothing would stop me. Not my parents, not the stupid barking. I was gonna prove them all, especially mom and dad. On the day of the performance, I arrived at school very early, but not in order to put on makeup or rehearse. Instead, I locked myself in the toilet and began to bark, loudly, uncontrollably, choking and twitching my arms and legs. I hoped that if I could get everything out before the performance, then I wouldn't twitch on stage. No, it didn't help. Just like at the wedding, at first, everything was okay, but then I barked and I got hysterical. I cried, barked, twitched. I was taken off the stage. Someone called my parents, and I couldn't even stop them. And then, shaking with horror, I was sent to the infirmary. My parents took me away, but it would be better if they had left me there. For the next 3 days, they didn't speak to me. I cried and barked, and I couldn't even hope that my dad and mom would forgive me. I ran away, disgraced myself. I was not a child, but a disappointment. That is why I was so surprised when mom and dad offered to visit one of my friends. Like they were going to leave the city for a business meeting, and they didn't want me to be bored without them. Maybe I was forgiven? I would have believed that, but I barked all the way to my friend's house, and each time, I saw how my dad twitched and how my mother frowned. As soon as Louise put on her headphones, I got out of her house and went to my place. And you know what? They had a party, a big party with champagne, cakes, and music. They just hid me from that. I understood that they were ashamed of me, but only at that moment I realized how much. They just decided to pretend that I didn't exist. My own parents. I looked at them having fun through the window and shook with shame and resentment. And instead of sobbing, a stupid barking was coming out of my mouth. In tears and constantly twitching like a puppet, I called my psychologist. A psychologist drove up to pick me up within half an hour and realized that I was literally thrown out of my own house like a naughty puppy. The party was over as soon as we entered. The psychologist tried to talk to my parents softly. Mom and dad blushed and began to hiss all sorts of threats. The guests nervously gathered to the exit, and something broke in me, and I began to spit out curses, one after the other, unable to stop. I couldn't control it, like the barking, but at that moment, I even liked it, because my parents were just in horror from so much swearing. The psychologist threatened to call the social services, and I don't know how it would have ended if the doorbell had not rang. There was Mrs. Casina behind the door. The scene surprised her, but she assured that she wouldn't interfere. She just wanted to apologize. After my disastrous speech, she was explained that my barking was a disease, not a bad joke. Of course, she couldn't blame me for that, blah blah. She wanted to continue our classes and prepare a new song for the competition by next year. The psychologist said that music would allow me to regain control of my body. And the parents, they seemed ashamed by that situation. The scandal was hushed up, and my parents went with me to the next meeting with the psychologist. But that's another story. Give us the thumbs up and subscribe to our channel.
Hello everyone, I'm Nicole and I'm 18 years old. Tell me, do you have any special features in your appearance? Something you're embarrassed about, or your parents? Watch this video to the end and learn how to get iron hands and how to learn to live with them. I made the doctors and attendants' jaws drop at my birth. My right forearm was missing. I don't know exactly why, but in any case, I haven't had a right hand all my life. I was wildly shy about it and begged my parents to give me a prosthesis, so that I was like other normal children. And what did I hear in response? Daughter, no, we don't have the money for this, so you can't. My mother tried to convince me that this is normal, that you can adapt to everything. Of course, she can adapt, because she doesn't not have a hand. I was bullied at school. And not girls, they were great. But the guys constantly teased me from a distance and called me ugly. Several times I got into fights, and even managed to kick someone in the neck. Then, my parents would lecture me and tell me that this was proof that I didn't need a prosthesis. Like, they will only tease me more, and in a fight it will break and Right, there's no money to change it. I know what was behind it. You're already weird. Your hands will attract attention. Why do you need a prosthesis if we still have to feed you with the spoon for the rest of our lives? Well, have your dreams ever come true in the most unexpected way? Once, I was hit by a car. I don't remember how it happened. I think I was crossing the road to green, and then I woke up in the hospital, and my mother was sitting next to me, crying, and my father was crying too. And instead of my hand, I had a stump wrapped in a bandage. The doctor explained everything to me. It turned out that the car did not just collide with me, it literally ran over my arm, and it was impossible to restore it. Can you imagine how absurd this is? The first thing I thought was, oh, my last hand! But, well, now you're not going to get away with it. I pleaded with my mother, made responsible arguments to my father. I said that artificial hands would improve their lives as well as mine, and that it was better at least with artificial hands than without them at all. They couldn't argue with me now. My mother asked me in a quavering voice how much it would cost. My father gasped when he saw the bill, but they were still under the influence of my sad hospital appearance and quickly processed everything. The installation took a long time. I took even longer to get used to them. But there came a time when I could write my own name by hand, and I was almost mad with joy. I was told not to load my hands so that the adaptation of the prosthesis would be more successful, but I couldn't stop running and touching everything. I have hands! Real! My own! Yay! Has it ever happened to you that your relatives did not understand your joys and sorrows? My parents, for some reason, did not share my joy. My father would praise me sourly, and my mother would turn away and almost start crying. I didn't know what was wrong with them. Were they so afraid of my hands? Would they sacrifice my hands for their own comfort? What did I need to do to make my parents love me the way I had become? Resentments accumulated for a long time, and they had to find a way out, the normal way out. For example, I went swimming at school. I had to get used to a new sport and initially swim the paddling pool, but then I started to achieve small success. I also went to therapy sessions to develop my hands, and that's where I met Charlie. Charlie had had surgery on his leg and was also getting used to the prosthesis. I shared my experience with him. We started communicating with each other, and later we realized that we liked each other. And parents, they didn't understand me at all. Dad treated me like a little girl. He tried to feed me with a spoon, didn't trust me even to carry a cup to my room, as if I had 0 hands instead of 2 iron ones. My mother became apathetic. I thought, okay, you don't want to believe in me? I'll make you. The swimming was going well, and if I could get into the competition, then would they drop the act? I really started to train more. And yes, I already achieved great results in 2 months. I was invited to the Paralympic youth competitions. The very first of them was held on a brand new pool. I searched the crowd for the eyes of my friends and family. Charlie and his mom came, and Dad came. Only my mother wasn't there. It hit me in the gut. My vision blurred and my legs gave way, and I almost fell. I got a good track and was able to set myself up to win, but I only had one thought in my head. She doesn't want to see me? Even now? Even when I go for a medal? I didn't lose, although I was in the most depressed mood. We all went to the cafe together, but when we were alone with Charlie, he told me something that startled me and almost killed me on the spot. My mom called him and told him to stop messing with my head. He didn't want to tell me about it before the competition, so as not to spoil the mood. But since my mom just didn't show up, what would you do if you found out that your mother had forbidden the boy to see you? Would you get angry? Start yelling? Would you try to talk peacefully? I almost immediately went home and made a huge fuss. My mother also started yelling at me, and in a fit of anger, she blurted out, "You'll never be normal. Don't lie to yourself." I said, "All right," and started packing. It only took me 15 minutes to get ready, and then I just went out with my bags, and I took the ground transport to Charlie's. He was terrified when he saw me. He said I was putting too much weight on my hands and helped me carry things to their house. My mom and dad started calling me. Eventually, I picked up the phone and told them everything. I threatened to sue for my emancipation if they kept calling me, and I didn't answer the phone again. Until the end of the school year. I almost gave up on the exams, but I still passed them and even got a diploma. After the ceremony, the kids and I decided to have fun, have a few drinks, and I was so relaxed that I answered the phone without looking. It was Dad. He said just a few words to me. "Your mother has cancer." I didn't believe it at first. It was very clever to make me come back for fear that my mother would be ill. Well, it worked out. I rushed home and immediately realized this was not blackmail, but a real disease. The tumor was launched to such a stage that the doctor decided that the leg would have to be removed and quite urgently. You should have seen my mother at that moment. She laid there all night looking at the ceiling, and then she got hysterical. Mom broke the service, crying and shouting that now she was a nobody, a pathetic, helpless invalid, and now she would never have a normal full life. I was angry. I'm not a fool, and I knew that she was talking about me too. I sharply grabbed her by the shoulders, slapped her, you know how great it turns out with Cyberhand, and growled, "Okay, calm down." My mother was shocked enough to stop talking, and I spoke. I was all talked out. I told her I just fucking graduated from high school, that I had a class in swimming and a cool guy who loved me, lots of friends, my first job that I got thanks to my prosthetics. I didn't have a damn problem with my prosthetics. All my problems were because of my mother. Here, I admit, it was ugly, but it sobered my mother like a second slap in the face. She looked down at her leg again. She said she didn't know how to live like this. She'd been normal all her life. I replied that the main thing was just to live. My mother didn't believe me, but my words helped her. Her leg was actually removed, and she was sobbing, holding my dad and me by the hand. But then we raised money and paid for her to have a prosthesis installed. My mother was actually starting to learn to walk again. She complained to me every night on the phone that she couldn't look at her reflection without being disgusted. I calmed her down and told her that she was very beautiful. And Dad told her too. Recently, my mother went out for the first time in shorts, and I was happy with her little victory. By the way, where did she go in her shorts? To watch my competition, of course. It's amazing how much garbage people have in their heads, and how it can ruin their lives and the lives of their loved ones. It's amazing how things change if you help a person clean up a little. My mother and I were able to overcome our prejudices. Look at your relatives too. Maybe mutual understanding is just around the corner? Did you like the video? Put a like so that YouTube will show it to your friends. And by the way, did you remember to subscribe to our channel and send us your new freaky stories?
I was sitting in a cafe with my friend Grace and talking about the wedding. It was already in 3 days. I took a sip of coffee and suddenly noticed something white in it. It was a tooth. Grace and I were in shock and were about to call the waiter when suddenly one more tooth plopped into the cup right out of my mouth. I froze in horror. No, that was not true. I was a college student and I was preparing to marry Glam. We loved each other and already lived together. I was just returning home. I wanted to see Glam as soon as possible and suddenly some guy abruptly snatched the bag out of my hands. Before I knew it, he already disappeared into the crowd. Heck, there was a wallet there. At least I left my phone in my pocket. I dialed Glam and told him about what had happened. He immediately replied not to get upset and go home. He and Mandy were already waiting for me. Mandy was Glam's half-sister. She used to hang out with us a lot. When I got home, Mandy and Glam were chatting in the kitchen. I kissed Glam on the cheek, to which Mandy said that she might get jealous, and then she smiled. Sisterly, of course. We sat down to drink tea. I told Mandy about my dream, the perfect smile at the wedding. I wanted to do teeth whitening, but as luck would have it, my wallet was stolen. Mandy immediately waved her hand and said that she would pay for an appointment with a dentist she knew. It would be a wedding present. I hugged Mandy. Glam had such a cool sister. The very next day, I went to the dentist, but as soon as I was in a dentist chair, he reached for my tooth with forceps. I pressed myself into a chair and shouted that I had come for a whitening. The dentist slapped his forehead, said that he was working hard, and reached for other tools. The result exceeded my expectations. The smile was snow-white. After thanking the doctor, I went home and immediately went to bed from fatigue. In the morning, I met with my friend Grace. I wanted to brag about my smile, but in the cafe, instead of bragging, I screamed in horror. My teeth were falling out one by one, and there was nothing I could do. The people around me started looking at me. I jumped up and immediately ran back to the dentist. He had to fix everything. But after the examination, he said that I was allergic to a whitening agent. He could make me implants, but they had an unreasonable price. I had no money of my own, and I fell into despair. No, right before the wedding. The dentist offered to put gold-plated crowns, but I waved it off. I don't need anything from you. When I returned home in tears, I noticed a parcel on the doorstep. This was the wedding dress that Glam ordered for me. Maybe this would cheer me up. I immediately opened the box in anticipation, but froze. Instead of a white wedding dress, there was a dirty brown one inside. I didn't understand anything, but Glam couldn't be wrong, and his last name was on the box. Only the initials were different. Apparently, they confused. I immediately called the salon to sort it out, but because of the fallen teeth, I lisped a lot, and the administrator did not understand a word. In the end, I lost one more tooth. I hung up and threw the phone on the couch. Heck. And then the phone rang again. Glam. God, I can't talk. I had to reject the call and text that I would be at a friend's house. I didn't want him to see me like this. Glam also reminded me that we had a family dinner with his parents in the evening. They were travelers, and they came right before the wedding to see me for the first time. Very timely. But I could not refuse. In the evening, Glam, his sister Mandy, and I were waiting for their parents at the restaurant. Glam wanted to kiss me, but I moved away from him to Mandy. She asked me to show a smile, and I immediately grabbed a glass and drank a strange-tasting juice, just not to communicate with anyone. Gradually, I relaxed. My head suddenly began to spin. I wanted to talk endlessly, and I didn't care about my teeth. I was lisping, and Glam was looking at me in disbelief. Suddenly, my favorite song started playing. I immediately jumped up and started to have fun like it was the last chance of my life. The others were sitting in their seats looking at me in shock. Boring people. Then an older couple came into the restaurant, but the man seemed so handsome, like Glam in old age. I immediately started flirting with him and dragging him to dance, but the man got angry and pushed me away, and I tripped and pushed the table. Worried, Glam helped me up and rudely told me that these were his parents. Parents? We made an interesting acquaintance. I laughed, and then I felt a few more teeth fall out. One of them fell right into the glass of Glam's mother. But she was in such shock that she did not notice it and raised the glass to her mouth. She took a sip, and the tooth struck in her throat. The woman choked and barely cleared her throat. Everyone was looking at me in shock, and I didn't care. I laughed out loud, standing in the center of the hall. But Glam did not share the joy, but only looked upset and shook his head. And then the guard came up to me to sit me down. No, I will not give up without a fight. I grabbed the food from the guests' plates and started throwing the chicken at the guards, but I was still captured. And Glam took his parents and left the restaurant. I wanted to run after them, but the guards held me tightly. Hey, let go! My fiancé is there! I almost pulled away when suddenly I fell, and then there was darkness. I woke up already in the cell with a terrible headache. I couldn't remember anything. What kind of filth was mixed into my juice? And then I felt that I had no teeth at all. I looked more like a homeless woman, not a bride. Grace went to bail for me and told me that I had been brawling for about an hour and the guards had called the cops to keep me in the cell. I was horrified to remember the whole nightmare. Glam would not forgive me. After thanking Grace, I immediately went to Glam. I needed to save the relationship, but Mandy met me on the threshold. I was glad, but she suddenly snapped that she would not let me in. Hey, I have something important to tell Glam. But she stood her ground. I clenched my fists. No, Glam had to find out the truth before he broke up with me. Abruptly pushing Mandy away, I rushed into Glam's room. He looked at me with a mixture of resentment and pain, and I took a deep breath. It was difficult to speak without teeth, but I tried. Glam, I didn't mean for this to happen. I love you. But then Mandy started dragging me out the door and shouting at him not to believe the airheaded girl. Tears streamed down my cheeks. This was not true. At the door, in despair, I confessed, I'm pregnant with your baby. Mandy immediately started shouting that the child was definitely not his and tried to push me out the door, but this time, Glam told her to stop. Mandy reluctantly let me out, and Glam doubtfully asked why I hadn't told him earlier. I sobbed. It was supposed to be a surprise for the wedding, but now I'm not sure that there will be a wedding. And these teeth began to fall out after Mandy's dentist. The dress he ordered turned out to be brown, strange juice, as if everyone's is against our marriage. Glam stood for a few seconds and thought. I was ready for the worst. But he suddenly said, I didn't order a dress for you, but there was your last name. And then I looked at his sister in shock and suddenly realized there were her initials on the box with the dress. And she recommended a dentist to me. Mandy began to slowly step back and kept telling Glam not to listen to my nonsense. Glam picked up the phone and threatened that he would call the dentist and find out everything from him. He wouldn't want to lose his license and cover for Glam's sister. Mandy clenched her fists and suddenly screamed that she had been in love with Glam since childhood, and I was the third wheel in their wonderful relationship. That's why she tried to ruin the wedding. She set this whole thing up with my teeth, put poison in the juice, but everything was useless, and therefore she would have to take matters into her own hands. The next second, Mandy suddenly attacked me, shouting that she would not give up Glam. But Glam pulled her away, growling that Mandy should not dare to approach me again. You are just a sister to me, Glam said, and she is my love. Then Glam looked into my eyes and finished, my destiny and my bride. I was ready to melt with happiness. Of course, the wedding had to be postponed a little, and it turned out to be much more modest. Glam gave most of the money to my dental implants. But still, we had a wedding and it was beautiful. Mandy was not invited. There were enough adventures without her. Glam even got into a fight with a witness and was left with a broken tooth. But this only added laughter to the happiest day of our lives. I realized that even the closest people can make mistakes, but no obstacle will break true love. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Ellie. I'm 16 years old. Has there ever been a moment in your life when your only desire at that moment was to stop feeling pain? I stopped, and you know, it's more of a curse than a gift. I was just a normal girl my own age, school, friends, and even a boyfriend. On that fateful day, my boyfriend Andy and I agreed to meet at the playground at noon. I arrived a little early and waited for him, watching the children. I have younger brothers, and looking after the children around me is already habit. Suddenly, one boy's ball jumped to the side and rolled under the swing. One of the ball players ran over there, and I immediately tensed up. There was another child on the swing. I shouted something to both of them, but it was too late. In an instant, I ran and covered a boy with my body. Then came a blow in the back, and we were carried forward. The parents ran up to us, and I gave them the child. The baby's mother thanked me in tears, and his father started to help me get up, but I couldn't. My legs! I couldn't feel them. I couldn't feel my back either. Do you have any idea how scary it is to stop feeling something that you usually don't even pay attention to? A few minutes later, Andy came and fell down next to me. I was already in tears. I was very scared. The ambulance picked me up. Andy contacted my parents. I was urgently sent for X-ray and then for surgery after being put into a medically induced coma. At the time, I couldn't believe that my life could be turned upside down in a matter of moments. Before the coma, I spent a few minutes with relatives. I had the feeling that I was saying goodbye. And then the darkness came. I woke up in a hospital bed. My head felt like it was made of cast iron, but I could lift it to look at myself. My feet were still there. My hands too. I tried to move my arm. It worked. Not very well, but I could do it. Then I switched to my legs. I wonder if they repaired them. Yes, I could move them. The sound of a blow on the bed awakened a nurse who was dozing nearby. She called for doctors. When several doctors entered the room, I was already glowing with happiness. I can move! And I don't feel any pain. But the doctors, for some reason, were not happy and said we should wait for my parents. I couldn't understand what was wrong. Within half an hour, I could move my toes. Wasn't that a good sign? When my parents arrived, doctors put everything on the table. I was operated on the same day I was admitted there. The operation was successful, but there was a medical malpractice. My nerve was damaged, and now I can't feel any pain. I said, "Are you kidding?" But the doctors drew my attention to the fact that one of them was pricking my leg with a needle all the time. I realized I didn't feel anything at all. A week later, my parents took me home. I was not very confident on my feet. I had to learn to walk again. At home, my dad carried me in his arms, and when we went to the hospital for rehabilitation, I moved around in a wheelchair. Only there, I could walk under the supervision of doctors. All this time, I was getting used to a new, painless world. So, several months passed. It was only thanks to the support of my family and Andy, with whom I constantly texted, that I was able to get back on my feet. And now the physiotherapy was over. I asked my mother when I could go back to school. My mother said that I would not go to school. Certainly not this year. They were afraid I might hurt myself because I didn't feel any pain. But why? I was healthy, and the fact that I didn't feel pain was even to my advantage. For example, the other day, a veterinarian came to us to vaccinate our cat. I had to hold her, and even though she scratched all my hands, I did fine. And the other day, I waxed my hair. And now I'm even ready to put up with it. My father said the doctors rescheduled my surgery in half a year. Then they would be able to give me back the feeling of pain, reconnecting damaged nerves. Once, I asked to go for a walk with my friends, but my parents stopped me again. They forbade me to leave the house alone. And if I tried, they would lock me in my room. What a twist! What was all the rehabilitation for? To continue living in a bubble? This is home detention, and undeserved. Have you ever been tried to save or support so that it would be better to be punished? I really wanted to see my friends, But most of all, I wanted to see Andy. Parents repeated, in a couple of months, not before. I didn't like this very much. And Andy kept asking for a meeting. I decided to meet him in secret while my parents were away. On Sunday, my parents were going shopping, and we had a few hours to meet. As soon as their car was gone, Andy came in. It was the first time we'd seen each other since the incident. Before that, there were only video calls. It was strange to hold a loved one and not feel his warmth or the touch of his hands, but I was still happy. It was the first time he was at my house, and I suggested that he come up to my room while I made tea. I poured a few cups and went up to him. Putting the cups by the bed, we lay down on it. It's been so long. Maybe our love will allow us to go to a new level in the relationship. Andy took my top off, and I took off his sweater. He threw me on my back. We were in such a hurry that we pushed something off the nightstand and didn't even pay attention. We lay on top of each other and kissed. This was the first time for me. I didn't feel anything, but the thought was exciting. Suddenly, Andy's face turned purple, and he looked at me with horror and whispered, "Your hand, it..." I looked at my hand and went into shock myself. My hand was red and blistered. Apparently, at the moment of our intimacy, I accidentally turned the cup of boiling water on myself and didn't notice. What did I do? We ran to the bathroom and I put my hand under the cold water. Damn, I don't feel anything, even though my hand felt like it belonged to Freddy Krueger. I looked back to thank Andy for noticing all this time, but he was gone. I went out into the hall and saw the front door open. He escaped, left me alone. Before I could recover from his betrayal, I saw the door open completely. He's back, I thought. But no, it was Mom and Dad. Dad was carrying bags and laughing, but when he saw me, his smile disappeared. Then there were screams, tears, and a showdown. Dad put locks on my door and on the windows in my room. My phone was taken away and the internet was turned off. I was taught by a visiting teacher. Sometimes he let me dial Andy from his phone, but he wouldn't answer it. So I lived like that for almost half a year. Sometimes I was very angry with my parents, but the burns on my arm reminded me that there was some sense in their actions. The doctors finally decided that I had recovered sufficiently and performed a second operation. When I regained consciousness, I immediately realized that everything had gone well because I was in terrible pain. But I was happy with the pain. I guess over the past 6 months, I deserved to feel pain. After 2 weeks, my parents let me go to school. I was glowing with joy. This was the moment when I would see my friends again, and Andy. But I was disappointed. When I came to class, everyone looked at me strangely. I could only hear their whispers. As it turned out, my dad had come to school and had a conflict with Andy. Everyone knew and didn't want any problems. I became a loner. And Andy, he just ignored me. I had been waiting so long to get back to school, and I was greeted like this? That really hurt. At the time, I felt like my world collapsed again, but the experience made me stronger, and my resentment of my former friends was quickly forgotten. There was no time to be upset. I had so much to try again. I'm at a different school now, and I have new friends, a new boyfriend, new interests. Sometimes I remember that crazy year without pain, and no, I don't want to repeat it. Please like my stories so that more people will see it. Maybe it will help someone solve their problem. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss new interesting stories. Good luck, everyone. Goodbye.